The diner was nearly empty. Just a couple of folks near the counter, sipping coffee like it was the only thing left worth holding on to. I sat in the corner booth, same one I used to take my daughter to after school when she still thought I hung the moon. Tonight, though, it was just me and the hum of the overhead lights. My tie was loosened, my resume folded in half and coffee stained in my coat pocket. Another dead-end interview. Another polite rejection. The house was gone. Foreclosed 2 months ago. The business. Dried up before summer even hit. Bills piled higher than my pride could reach. I hadn't told anyone how close I came to selling my wedding ring just to keep the lights on last winter. I just couldn't do it. I stared at the napkin in front of me and began folding. A leaf. My mother used to fold them during tense dinners. Keeps your hands busy, son. Keeps your mouth from saying what your heart can't take back. I folded without thinking. That habit was the last thing I had of her. My phone buzzed. A voicemail from this morning. I shouldn't have played it again, but I did. You're useless, Dad. You failed at everything. Her voice, sharp, clean cut, like a knife you didn't see coming. I sat there for a while, holding that folded napkin, listening to her words echo in my head. They say when it rains, it pours, but no one warns you what drowning feels like. Later that evening, I pulled up outside Marjorie's favorite Italian spot. She'd insisted on a family dinner for Lauren's college scholarship celebration. Told me to wear a jacket and keep it civil. I hadn't been invited to anything in months. Inside, it was all white linen and fake smiles. My brothers were already there, both with wives dripping in designer and mouths full of judgment dressed as concern. My ex-wife sat near the head of the table like it was still her kingdom. And Lauren? She didn't even look at me. Eyes fixed on her phone like I was part of the wallpaper. Dinner began with the usual small talk. My brother Nathan laughed too loud. So what are you up to these days, man? Still, figuring things out? Something like that, I replied, steady. Good for you. Finding yourself. It's never too late, right? Their wives chuckled behind their glasses of wine. Then came the toast. To Lauren, Marjorie beamed. Our brilliant, beautiful girl off to chase dreams. Lauren stood. Thanks, Mom. And to everyone here. Well, almost everyone. She raised her glass. Except the one person who never showed up when it counted, who failed at everything he touched. Thanks for teaching me what not to be, Dad. Silence. Forks froze midair. My brothers stared. Marjorie didn't flinch. I opened my mouth, then closed it. If I spoke up now, would anyone even listen? I stared down at my plate, that knot tightening in my gut. The silence dragged like everyone was waiting for me to confirm what she said was true. Then the bill came. The waiter, poor kid, placed it right in front of me. Habit, maybe. Or maybe the universe still had jokes to tell. Marjorie didn't miss a beat. Let him pay. He owes us enough already. I reached for my coat pocket. Wallet wasn't there. I checked again. Empty. I'd left it in the car. Nathan let out a low laugh. Don't worry. I got it. He can't even pay for dinner, let alone his own life. I stood, slow, careful not to knock anything over, like that would have somehow made it worse. Outside, the night felt colder than it should have been. I sat in my car, hands on the wheel, engine off. I was a provider once. Now I'm their punchline. The words barely left my mouth, but they hit harder than any insult thrown across that table. I didn't want to go home, not to that rented room with peeling wallpaper and a broken heater. I needed air. Space. A moment. A jazz bar sat 2 blocks down, tucked between a pawn shop and a shuttered florist. My father used to bring me there after Little League games, back when being a hero didn't come with conditions. I walked in. Dim lights. Live sacks. That scent of old whiskey and old memories. I slid into a booth near the back. That's when I saw him. A man. Well-dressed, silver hair, maybe late 60s. He looked over and raised his glass. Smiled like he'd known me for years. I didn't know it then, but this stranger was about to change my life forever. I stayed in that booth for a while, long after the saxophonist had wrapped up and the clink of glasses had faded into low murmurs. Something about that bar, it slowed time. It smelled the same as it had decades ago when my dad and I would come in after his night shifts. A mix of old wood, worn leather, and bourbon soaked into the walls. Comforting. Familiar. The kind of place where no one asked questions you couldn't answer. I sat down near the back, kept my coat on, and ordered a glass of water. The bartender gave me a quiet nod. He remembered me, I could tell, but didn't say a word. That was fine. I wasn't in the mood to talk. I pulled a napkin toward me, started writing, nonsense at first, doodles, circles, then words. Do I matter? Am I always going to be the one they blame? How do you stand tall when everyone sees you as small? I thought about my dad. He once told me sitting right at this bar, you don't need to be loud to be strong, just still enough to hear yourself think. I didn't feel strong. I felt invisible, like someone who'd overstayed his welcome in his own life. That's when I noticed the man. He'd been sitting 2 stools down, sharp gray suit, polished shoes, eyes that missed nothing. He didn't look like he belonged there, not in a place like this, but he fit, the way a wolf fits into a dark forest. You've had a rough day, haven't you? His voice was low, steady, didn't feel intrusive. I looked at him. Normally I'd shrug it off, say something like, it's nothing, but not tonight. I'm tired of being the family burden, I said. He nodded slowly, like he knew that exact kind of weight. I've been there, he said. Success doesn't protect you from being misunderstood. Sometimes it makes it worse. We talked about fatherhood, regret, how love can sour into judgment. He told me his name was Franklin Lorette. I recognized it, barely, real estate maybe, a name I'd seen once on a billboard downtown. He leaned in slightly. Being underestimated is the best disguise success can wear, he said. They laugh while you build. There was no pity in his voice, just clarity, like someone who'd already bled through what I was barely surviving. I don't know how long we talked. Could have been minutes, could have been hours, but when the check came, he paid it without a word. I reached to thank him, but he waved it off. As he stood to leave, he paused by my booth. Do me a favor, he said, slipping something into the inside pocket of my coat. Don't waste the lesson tonight gave you. He nodded once, then disappeared out the front. I sat there confused, reached into my coat, a check, made out to me. $25,000, signed, no strings, just a note. Use this to remind them who you really are. My breath caught in my chest. I stood up so fast my chair screeched, ran out the door. He was lying in the alley, his back against the wall. 2 paramedics were already there, moving fast, calling for vitals. I froze, watched from a few feet away, heart hammering in my throat. He never moved again. One of the EMTs looked up. You know him? I nodded, barely. Name's Franklin Lorette, the other said, checking his ID. Real estate guy, big donor. You're lucky. Not many get to talk to a man like that. I gave a statement, told them about the bar, the talk, the check. They took my number. Then they were gone. Just like that, so was he. I sat back inside for a while, the same glass of water now warm and untouched. The napkin I'd scribbled on earlier was still there. I turned it over, started writing again. Not questions this time. Plans. A list. A map. When life pushes you down, don't get even. Get better. That's what he said. I didn't sleep that night. Just watched the ceiling and listened to the silence, wondering why a man like that would pick me, of all people, for his final conversation. As I left the bar near dawn, the bartender handed me an envelope. He left this for you, he said. Inside was a single note. This isn't charity, it's investment. Don't let them erase you. The sun barely touched the horizon when I opened my eyes. For a second, I wasn't sure if last night had really happened, but the envelope still sat on my nightstand, untouched, waiting. And beside it, the check. $25,000 folded so neatly it looked like it belonged to someone else's life. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and just stared at it. My thoughts were louder than my heartbeat. Is this a setup? A test? Some kind of cruel joke? I'd been made the punchline so many times I didn't know what genuine kindness looked like anymore, but I kept hearing his voice. Don't let them erase you. I picked up the envelope. Inside a handwritten note, smooth cursive, steady hand. It read, "You remind me of the man I used to be before they broke me." Those words didn't lift me. They hit me, hard. Not because they praised me, but because they warned me. I folded the letter carefully, then noticed something else tucked inside. Another slip. Different handwriting. Smaller. Thank you, Wessing, for saving me that night. What night? I sat back trying to make sense of it. Then a memory surfaced. Years ago, I was leaving the same jazz bar, saw a man stumbling out the side alley, bleeding from the forehead, mumbling. He looked like he'd been mugged, or maybe drunk himself into trouble. I helped him up, called a cab, even paid for it. Didn't ask questions, didn't get his name. Could that have been him? I never gave it another thought. It was just a moment of decency, a thing you do when no one's watching. But somehow, it had circled back. Not as a thank you, but as a legacy. I ran my hand over my face. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own life. I mattered to someone. Even if only once. Even if only in the final hours of their story. Inside the envelope, tucked beneath the note, was a velvet pouch. I opened it. Inside, a pocket watch. Old, elegant, heavy. The initials FL were etched on the back. I pressed the side clasp. The cover popped open. On the inside lid, just above the worn-out gears, was a phrase engraved in tiny, perfect lettering. Time proves truth. It wasn't just a gift. It was a message. He didn't give me money and a trinket. He gave me responsibility. I stood up, walked to the mirror above my dresser. Same face, same tired eyes, but something was different. I grabbed my only clean shirt, pulled it on, held the watch in one hand, the letter in the other. This is either a handout, I whispered to my reflection, or it's a reminder. I get to choose. And I knew then I wouldn't announce it. I wouldn't post about it or wave it around. I'd show them. Quietly. Through action. I slid the watch into my pocket, folded the letters, tucked them back into the envelope. The past didn't own me anymore. I opened the window, let the morning air hit my face. Then, just as I turned toward the door, someone knocked. Not light, not aggressive. Firm. I walked over, looked through the peephole. A man stood outside, mid-50s maybe, suit pressed, hair combed back, holding a leather briefcase. He looked straight at the door, like he knew I was watching. "Mr. Tremaine," he called out. "I'm here regarding Mr. Franklin Loret's estate." The letter came just after noon, thick paper, heavy envelope, sealed with a wax insignia I didn't recognize. I stood at the kitchen counter in my cramped office apartment, staring at it like it had teeth. I already knew what it was. The same man from yesterday, the one in the suit with the briefcase, had said more would follow. Now here it was. My name printed in a formal serif, the kind of font meant to tell you that you mattered, but only in a legal sense. Inside, instructions. A meeting. Today. Documents to be signed. Terms to be reviewed. I read it 3 times. I wasn't sure if I was nervous or just tired. There was a line at the bottom that stuck with me. Presence required, no substitutions. It sounded more like a command than an invitation. As I walked to the sink to rinse my cup, I heard Foster's voice echo from a memory years back. He'd said it after winning some legal argument with our uncle over property lines. Power doesn't come from shouting. It waits, quietly, then moves. That stuck with me then. Now it was haunting. The law office was one of those sterile mid-rise buildings off Richmond Ave, glass everywhere. Not a soul smiled when I walked in. They ushered me to a conference room. Cold air, warm leather chairs. The executor, same man, now with glasses on, opened a file and began reading like it was just another Tuesday. A clause caught my ear. If Mr. Tremaine publicly discloses Mr. Loret's personal reasons for including him in the estate, the entire gift shall be rescinded. I blinked. He repeated it, slow and deliberate. If you speak about why you were chosen, why he gave what he gave, you forfeit it entirely. I didn't speak, not because I agreed, because I couldn't trust my voice not to crack from the sudden punch in the chest. All my life I'd been told to stay quiet, in family dinners, at church, in courtrooms. Now, again, silence as a condition of worth. My signature was already halfway to the paper when another screen lit up across the table. A video call. Grainy, familiar face. Marvina. Her tone didn't match the moment. "Well, look at you," she said, fake smile and all. "Signing papers like a big man. Don't get too excited. All you do is sign checks." The executor tried to hide his discomfort. I didn't. I let her words hang in the air like cheap perfume. I stared at the screen, not blinking, not speaking. She wanted a reaction. I gave her nothing. Because I knew now. Silence wasn't just their weapon. It could be mine too. The second the papers were signed, I asked to step outside. Cold air greeted me harder than I expected. I leaned against the concrete column, breathing in short bursts. I could have torn those papers in half. I almost did. But I saw the security cameras above the doorway. The legal risk. The power behind that building. I wasn't naive. So I played their game. Walked back in. Took my copy. Folded it carefully. Before I left, I held it up just enough to snap photos on my phone. Each page, top to bottom. Evidence. Proof. Just in case. By the time I made it down to the sidewalk, the sun had slipped behind the clouds. That kind of gray where you can't tell if it's late afternoon or early evening. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short. We all thought you were gone. Don't disappoint us again. I stared at it for a long moment. It wasn't from family. It wasn't even a name I recognized. But the message was clear. People were watching. Not just relatives. People with something to lose if I didn't stay small. I looked up at the building one last time, then slid my phone back into my pocket and walked toward the parking garage. The walk down into the parking garage felt longer than it should have. Each echo of my footsteps carried that message in my head. Don't disappoint us again. I kept the envelope tucked under my arm, the watch in my pocket, and every sense sharp as a blade. The hum of an elevator somewhere above. A car door slamming in the distance. Even the flicker of the overhead lights seemed like a warning. I thought about who us could be. My family. The executors. Someone else who believed they owned a stake in my silence. It didn't matter. The intent was clear. I wasn't meant to rise, only to remain exactly where they'd placed me. My father used to say, when a room goes quiet, someone's about to lie. This whole garage was quiet. When I reached my car, I saw movement. A shadow peeled from behind a concrete pillar. Malcolm. He stepped out just enough to be seen, hands in his pockets, that same familiar lean, 1 foot forward, chin tilted, as if the whole world still belonged to him. Older by 8 years, and somehow still performing the role of eldest judge and executioner. So, he said, his voice flat, almost amused, you really think a signature makes you worthy? I hadn't heard his voice in a year. Not since we nearly tore each other apart at our mother's funeral. But this wasn't a surprise. Not really. This was calculated. Didn't expect to see you here, I said calmly. He smirked. I've been here. Longer than you realize. You think Franklin Lorette found you? He went through me first. He stepped closer. I told him you'd twist sympathy into opportunity. Looks like I was right. So that was it. He wasn't here to warn me. He was here to reclaim control. I kept my posture still. No sudden movements. Malcolm was the type who fed on reaction. You didn't come to talk, I said. You came to make sure I still knew my place. His eyes sharpened. A small twitch. The only sign I'd struck something true. You've always played the victim, he said. Now you're playing heir. Tell me, how long before you embarrass yourself again? I felt heat move through my chest, but I didn't show it. Instead, I let silence hang between us. Silence, my new language. He stepped in closer, voice dropping. People won't let this slide. Men far bigger than me. You don't belong in boardrooms, ZNL. You belong on the fringe, watching. There it was. Not anger. Fear. I don't need your permission, I said quietly. Or your belief. You're not the gate anymore. His jaw tensed. I'd never spoken to him like that. You're not the storm, I added. Not to me, not anymore. He shoved me, not hard, but enough to make his point. I didn't move back. That shook him more than any punch could have. He backed away slowly, pointing a warning finger. You've made enemies you can't charm or outsmart, and they don't forgive. I'm not asking them to, I replied. He turned, disappearing behind the column he emerged from, leaving the stench of challenge in the air. I exhaled, long and controlled, then got into my car. My hands trembled only for a moment before steadying on the wheel. I reached into my coat and pulled out the pocket watch. Cool, solid, absolute. I won't run, I whispered. Not this time. I started the engine. My phone vibrated. Another unknown number. This time, not a message. A video. I pressed play. It was footage, grainy but clear enough. Me and Franklin Lorette at the jazz bar, talking, laughing, his hand on my shoulder. The caption beneath it. What would the world think if they knew? I didn't take the elevator. I climbed every step to my front door like I was chasing air that wouldn't come. The garage confrontation still burned in my limbs. Malcolm's voice echoing, that video flashing in my mind like a warning light behind the eyes. I locked the door behind me, went straight to the kitchen, poured coffee with a hand I didn't realize was trembling, sat down, opened my phone, snapped photos of everything, every page of the contract, the envelope, the watch. I sent them to Omari with a message. If anything happens, you know where this starts. I didn't sit long. My phone buzzed again, this time a headline from the local station. Franklin Lorette, local philanthropist, found dead in his home. I froze. No time for denial. He was alive the day before. Sharp. Calculated. Holding a legacy like a loaded gun. Now, gone. They said it looked like a heart attack. Others weren't buying it. Neither was I. His death didn't feel natural. Not with everything circling. Not with what he gave me. And definitely not with what he knew. The next hours moved like I was inside a glass box. Everything visible, nothing reachable. My name popped up on news blogs. Zion L. Tremaine, potential heir, photos from court, shots of me leaving the office. Even one from years ago, me holding a donation check with Franklin standing beside me, back when I didn't know who he was. It didn't feel like attention, it felt like bait. That afternoon, I had no intention of talking to the press, but they were waiting. At the foot of the steps near the law office, a cluster of microphones and over-gelled hair. One voice broke through the wall of noise. "Mr. Tremaine, are you the rightful heir now?" I paused, not because I didn't have a response, but because I did, and knew I couldn't say it. The silence clause, still binding, still hanging over my head like a guillotine. "I'm following the law," I said, steady. "As it should be followed." I could feel the cameras zoom in. A woman to my left, editor of one of the bigger dailies, tilted her head and smiled like she'd just watched a magician slip something up his sleeve. They weren't here for news. They were here for the first crack in the wall. Later that evening, I met Omari at his studio. Small, cluttered, but quiet. He had the photos I'd sent pulled up on a screen, zooming into signatures, checking document codes. "This," he said, pointing, "isn't the version of the will that was referenced in the public filing." I moved closer. "You're sure?" He nodded. "They filed one that excludes any reference to the watch or the envelope. No personal note. Nothing binding you with Franklin directly." "So they're setting up a public version," I muttered, "and keeping the real one buried." "Exactly." That was the moment I stopped reacting and started building. I drafted a statement. No heat, no accusations, just bulletproof facts. I gave it to Omari to hold, along with scanned copies of everything Lorette left me. Then I called the law firm, formally requested a review of all will versions, past and present, filed with probate. That one move lit a fuse, but I was ready for the explosion. I walked out of Omari's place as the sun dipped behind buildings that no longer looked tall to me. They looked like walls I could climb. When I got home, the mailbox was stuffed, junk mail, ads, but right on top, wrapped in matte black paper like a funeral gift, was a box. No return address. Inside, a will. Signed, stamped, dated, with Marvina's name in the corner. A fake. She wanted to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. The moment I opened the box, my hands trembled. Not from excitement, but a premonition of the chaos it contained. Inside was a certified copy of an earlier will, the one that deliberately excluded me. Marvina had sent it, and just seeing her handwriting made a cold knot tighten in my chest. I stormed into the law firm, confronting the staff with a controlled fury. "Explain this. Were you colluding with her?" I demanded. The murmurs of onlookers rose like a tide. Whispers of scandal were already spreading. I held my ground, insisting on access to all archived copies and correspondence. The courtroom lawn felt like a battlefield, and I was no longer the youngest son to be overlooked. "We may sit quietly," I said through gritted teeth, "but truth doesn't whisper forever." Then came Marvina's next move, and it was as sharp as it was public. A press release declared her intention to reclaim every personal item Mr. Lorette had given me, the engraved pocket watch, the folded napkin, even small keepsakes, all labeled gifts under false pretenses. Tabloids jumped at it, branding me a taking opportunist. I could feel the sting of public judgment, but I refused to flinch. No one gives what they expect to take back, I reminded myself. Legal counsel confirmed my ownership, and I began countering publicly, using facts rather than fury. The fight had escalated, but I was ready to meet it head-on. The venom didn't stop there. Betrayal, in a gesture meant to mock, sent me $50 via Venmo with a note. A start, Dad. A family insider tweeted about it immediately. Everyone saw it as charity, but the intent was clear. Contempt disguised as generosity. I clenched my jaw, feeling the burn of humiliation, the familiar mix of anger and disbelief. Should I respond or let it slide? I chose silence in the moment, letting the insult linger like smoke while plotting my strategic counteroffensive. Back at home, Omari and I pored over every piece of evidence, every timeline, every photo and document I had. We drafted a public statement for my lawyer exposing Marvina's manipulation and duplicity. Witnesses were scheduled for depositions. Omari, the bartender who had seen Lorette's gestures firsthand, law firm clerks who had handled the documents. I leaked proof of an earlier will that had favored me, forcing Marvina's hand into defensive positions she hadn't anticipated. Emotionally, I felt a shift. The familiar weight of walking backward for them lifted, replaced by determination. No more bending to their narrative, Didin, I whispered to myself. Just when I thought the day could not grow more intense, my phone buzzed. A reporter was on the line. Mr. Tremaine, we have audio from a family meeting where you were blamed behind your back, the voice said. They wanted to air it, if I consented. My fingers tightened around the device. The choice was mine, stay silent or let the truth breathe. I exhaled, steadying my pulse. Air it, I said finally, voice low but firm. It was time. Time to stop hiding in the shadows of their schemes and let the world hear what had really happened. The stage was set, and no one could deny the echoes of their own words any longer. I stepped into the grand hall where the estate reading was to take place, heart pounding under my jacket. The room was full. Family, attorneys, journalists, neighbors. A hush fell as I entered. Eyes drifted. Whispers snapped into silence. I clutched the envelope in one hand, kept the pocket watch tucked in a hidden seam of my suit. This was the moment I knew silence ended. I recalled the napkin, that folded leaf, the note, the legacy Mr. Lorette left untouched. Those small things pulled me forward. I stood tall, letting the air carry my presence. A legal projector flickered on. Marvina sat across from me, composed, but her eyes shifted. The murmurs grew louder. The lawyer for the opposing side projected a contract, a version claiming I had signed away all claims. The words glared across the screen as bold as accusations. I felt the room tilt around me, but before panic set in, my own counsel rose and challenged the projection. That version is forged, she said. We have time-stamped photographs and notary records proving it differs from the version I hold. She motioned to me. I stood and walked forward, each step calm but sure. I held up my phone, screens full of images, documents, signatures in contrast. Gasps rippled across faces. Marvina's face went pale. Her fingers gripped her phone before she pulled it away. The room shifted. Her facade trembled. The air tasted different. I said quietly, they tried to bury the truth. But truth doesn't live underground forever. The shift in tone was subtle but seismic. Then, in mid-presentation, my counsel called for the map. She requested we bring up the forgotten asset, the land parcel no one mentioned publicly. The deed was displayed. It showed the lot assigned originally by my grandfather to me, later reassigned under obscure circumstances. The value was staggering. The silence in that room was immediate. Even the attorneys blinked. Marvina's lips parted. Her composure cracked. That plot changed the game financially, legally, morally. I remained quiet, let them digest. I watched as whispers formed into acknowledgement. Then the executor rose from behind the bench and handed a placard to a clerk. It read, Zionel Tremaine. Only chair labeled, center seat, head of table. Shock washed through the crowd. Gasps, murmurs, swallowed breaths. I approached. The steps felt light. I sat at the labeled chair. All eyes turned my way. My voice was firm. Today they labeled me. Tomorrow I define my legacy. The words echoed in the hush. It wasn't boastful. It was claim. As I sat, the clerk next to me slid open the envelope from Mr. Lorette across the table. The room held its breath. Inside was an addendum, sealed. The message visible. Power is given, but responsibility is earned. I reached out, lifted the seal deliberately. The air shifted. Everyone leaned forward. Nothing would ever be the same. The sun came up slower that morning, or maybe I was just up earlier to notice. I stood barefoot on the back porch of the estate, coffee in hand, listening to the birds argue over territory in the tall pecans. For the first time in years, I wasn't haunted by what I'd lost. The silence around me didn't feel like a warning anymore. It felt earned. Everything had shifted. The courtroom noise, the headlines, the whispers in back rooms, all had faded like a bad storm that finally ran out of thunder. What remained wasn't the fortune, but the fragments of dignity I'd pieced back together. The weight on my chest was lighter. Marvina hadn't said a word since that day. Legal silence clause. But I saw it in people's faces now. Public opinion didn't need her permission to turn. Later that morning, I took a slow walk through the estate garden. The roses were trimmed back for fall. I felt gravel under my shoes, the kind of simple texture that reminds you you're still standing. My youngest niece came skipping down the path, hair bouncing, no idea how heavy the past weeks had been. She grabbed my hand. "Uncle Z, are you the boss now?" I crouched down, eye level with her. Being in charge doesn't mean people fear you. It means you make sure everyone gets treated right, even the ones you don't like. She blinked, then nodded, like she understood. Kids have a way of making truths sound simpler than they feel. I looked across the lawn and told her we'd be starting a foundation in Mr. Lorette's name. It'd serve single parents and veterans, people often doing the most with the least. She tilted her head. "Is that what you wanted?" "No," I said. "But it's what's right." I quoted Maya Angelou, something that stuck with me years ago. People will forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. That's what I wanted to leave behind. Not a bigger bank account, just cleaner air to breathe, emotionally speaking. Not long after, my lawyer brought the final paperwork. Everything was done, court approved. I had one last choice. I could dissolve the family board, take it all, or restructure it, keep the system, but at the head of it, I sat with that. Instead, I asked for a redistribution. The estate split across parts of the family that had been ignored for decades. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Uncles who were cut off for marrying the wrong kind of woman. Aunts who raised their own siblings' kids without thanks. They deserved a seat at the table, too. If they buried me under lies, I told my lawyer, I'll build homes on truth. He didn't respond, just nodded. Across the lawn, Marvina stood watching. No words, no apology. But I saw it. Tears glinting, quickly wiped away. Maybe guilt, maybe something else. It wasn't mine to name anymore. Weeks passed. The headlines faded. One local paper ran a story. Former black sheep becomes beacon of legacy. I didn't care about the praise, but I saw the change. People started showing up at the community center. Kids found mentors. Single moms got grants. Veterans sat around tables again laughing. At a dedication event, I read Mr. Lorette's final letter aloud. True wealth is how many lives you lift, not how many zeros you count. Afterward, I sat under an old oak tree watching families play. There was joy in the air. Real, not forced, not curated, just human. That night, back in my room, I was folding shirts when I heard a knock. No one there. Just a letter on the ground. No name, no return address. You may think it's over, it read, but someone else knows the truth. I sat down, envelope still in hand. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from knowing the story still had more breath left in it. I stared at it a long time, feeling something I hadn't in weeks. Dread.